Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbia. And our minister, as you may know, is the Reverend Stephen Robinson. And my name is Pat Moore, and I'm your leader for the day. When a guest speaker is, on those Sundays when Stephen's not in the pulpit, such as today, we have a variety of speakers from this congregation or from recognized guests, like we do today, for example. And to those of you that are here with us in the sanctuary, please be advised that this service is being streamed on YouTube. And to those of you watching the stream service, we're glad to have you watching, and of course we'd rather have you here in person, but we're glad you're with us on YouTube. Make sure that you read the announcements that are in your printed order of service, and be sure to read the weekly events that are emailed to you each Thursday from our administrator, as well as the unigram and the website. And I urge you to keep the website open on your tab, on your internet browser, so you can keep up with what's happening here. Also, please be advised that the COVID restrictions that are approved by the Board of Trustees they're in your order of service. And you'll notice that we practice social distancing, but that wearing a mask is optional. And here's an announcement for the parents. If you need to occupy the young folks, we do have toys and books in the back of the social hall. So please take advantage of those. And by the way, today's flowers have been brought to us, these beautiful yellow roses from Carita Barr. Thank you, Carita. And now, if you'll silence all of your electronic devices as we enter ourselves for today's service and listen to the prelude.
This morning's prelude is by singer-songwriter duo Ma Muse, and it's called We Shall Be Known.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the wells. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the wells. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
absolutely love that. Thank you, guys, Elizabeth and Anna. That was beautiful. And before I ask you to stand, I do have an additional announcement that I forgot. And this is about Share the Plate. The voting, you can find that in your order of service on how to vote. It begins today and goes on through November 27th. And we're asking you to vote online at the link given in your order of service and to go to the UUCC website on the Share the Plate page. And incidentally, Liz has now put it on the home page, so you can see it immediately when you go to the website. Online voting is an important step in saving paper and proving you can conquer technology. And I have one last announcement, and that is that keep in mind that if you want to have feedback to the Article 2 from UUA, that the last day is tomorrow. So look at your e-blast and you will see all the information you need for that. It's also on the website on how to do that. And if you will join me now and stand, let's do our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant with one another. Please be seated. Thank you. Well, welcome on this first day of non-summer. I was so pleased to put on a sweater and boots. It's about time. It's almost Thanksgiving. Unitarian Universalism is a diverse and non-creedal religion. Now, we're a covenantal religion, which means we don't have to believe the same in order to treat each other the same, with respect, equity, compassion, and dignity. Our community is based on deeds, not creeds. As Unitarian Universalists, we do stand on the side of love, embracing all people regardless of age, color, race, socioeconomic status, physical ability, or religious background or lack thereof. We've been officially designated by the Unitarian Universalist Association as a welcoming congregation, which means that we welcome LGBTQ+ individuals. And we especially invite families with young children. We even have a nursery. We encourage people to wear name tags, like I forgot, so that we get to know each other. Board members wear green name tags, and they always welcome your comments and questions and suggestions. Would the members of our Board of Trustees please stand now so that you can recognize them? That's all the people you go to for questions. Yes. And at this time, we'd also like to recognize any guests or visitors that are with us today. So visitors, if you are willing and able, please rise and share with us your name and where you're from. And if you have guests, please feel free to introduce them. Mark, would you take the microphone around? Or Richard, somebody? Thank you. I forgot to ask somebody to do that beforehand. And please wait for the microphone. Do we have any visitors or guests?
Hello, my name is Mary Zamboni. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and I'm here visiting. So I wanted to enjoy the service with you today.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome. Thank you, Mary.
Welcome, Mary.
Oh.
Thank you. Good morning. My name's Marilyn Morrow. I'm here with Neal today, visiting from Asheville, North Carolina.
Welcome, Marilyn.
Yes. Thank you, Marilyn. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Latrell Oliver, the proud elder sister of Regina Moody. Thank you. I've come many times through the years and feel like that I don't need to stand up, but it's been a long time since I've been here. Life happens to all of us, doesn't it? So thank you for having a person whom I consider a former friend, because I've heard him speak so many times, and it is my pleasure to be back this morning for another treat. Thank you, Neal.
I was going to say, is that a paid announcement?
Paid announcement. Anybody else? Any other visitors? Okay.
Thank you. And visitors, would you please fill out a visitor card and put in the collection plate. There should be one in the chair in front of you. And that information will enable you to send us to send you our newsletter and emails. Nobody will come to visit. Okay. Let's take a moment. We're still under some COVID restrictions, but if you feel comfortable doing it, just take a minute and turn to the person beside you and introduce yourself and offer a greeting. I'm going to sit behind you and goose you when you need it. Okay. No, I'm going to go down there. Okay, I hadn't touched it.
Do you need to use this?
No. You can put that down here, yeah. Good call. Okay, let me see. All right.
What are these papers here?
I don't know, that's something we handed out for Article 2. That's,
Should we leave it up here?
I can take it with me, I'm gonna put it out for you.
Okay, that's good.
It shouldn't be up there. All right, let me see what else I got. Got 1 or 2
You need
minutes.
this one here.
No, I got mine. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Am I going to have to come over here and tell you guys to sit down? It's so nice to reconnect with old friends. It's hard to shut you up. Thank you. And next on the agenda is the chalice lighting. And our chalice lighter today is somebody you know.
Now, when I was growing up in the Baptist church, the custom was people would fill in the back rows first. I thought y'all were supposed to be Unitarians. What's the deal here? It feels great to be back home, and I do feel home when I come here. You know, thank you. You know, you guys are to blame for my being a Unitarian and minister, Unitarian minister. Back in 1999, I started attending this congregation. I came here because I'd finished my doctorate in psychology at Baylor, and I came here to work as an internship at USC Counseling Center. And we started attending the congregation here and fell in love with you all. And then a few years later, you offered me a job as your part-time minister. And so for a few years, I was working what was then known as Baptist Hospital as a psychologist and serving as your part-time minister. And I fell in love with you and with being a Unitarian minister. I thought, hey, if this is what Unitarian Universalism was like, I think I could be religious again. And I served you guys from 2004 until 2015. Where I then went up north to a congregation outside Philadelphia and had a wonderful time there, but I didn't like the cold weather. And so I moved back down here about 2 years ago to go to Asheville, North Carolina, where I'm once again a psychologist. But it is good to be back home and good to see so many familiar faces, as well as so many unfamiliar faces. I got to tell you, I deal with a lot of ministers from a lot of denominations, and a lot of congregations have been decimated by the pandemic. So it's a testament to your warm, welcoming community that you have maintained, that there are so many new faces here. So I hope you justifiably feel proud of the kind of community you have maintained. It really is heartwarming to see all of you here, and it's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be your guest this morning.
Thank you, Neal. And now that you have officially met him, he's going to give you the opening words.
A long time ago in seminary, I learned that the true meaning of the word prophecy is not telling the future, it's telling the truth. Biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann says that the 3 prophetic tasks of the church are: 1, to tell the truth in a society which lives in illusion; 2, to grieve in a society that practices denial; and 3, to express hope in a society that lives in despair. That is our task.
Our musical meditation this morning is a song by a dear singer-songwriter who I adore from my home state of Michigan. Her name is May Erlewine. This song is called Graceful, and I feel like it's about how we can commit ourselves to practicing gratitude, even in this world with so much heartbreak, in this world that can break our heart and call to us in so many ways. I'm gonna cry all alone in this room. Don't ask me why. It's just that I need to. I feel the sorrow, I feel the pain, but I will be grateful at the end of the day. I'm gonna walk it myself, through the storms in my body, through the high water hell. I will press on, be what it may, and I will be grateful at the end of the day. The sorrow I see, I will not feel at ease, I will not feel at peace. When the world leaves me sleepless, then I'll be awake, and I will be grateful the end of the day. I will be strong and stronger still, torn from my when I speak my truth. You'll hear me say that I am grateful at the end of the day.
Our story for all ages is entitled "The Table Where Rich People Sit" by Bird Baylor. If you could see us sitting here in our old scratched up homemade kitchen table, you'd know that we are not rich. But my father is trying to tell us we are. Doesn't he notice my worn out shoes, or that my little brother has patches on his pants he wears to first grade? You can't fool me, I say. We're poor. Would rich people sit at a table like this? But my mother sort of pats the table and says, well, we're rich, and we sit here every day. Sometimes I think I'm the only one in my whole family who is sensible. I tell my parents they should both get better jobs so we could buy lots of nice new things. I tell them I look worse than anyone else at school. I hate to bring this up, I say, but it would help if you both had a little more ambition. Now, right here, I must admit that my parents have some strange ideas about working. They think the only jobs worth having are jobs outdoors. They want cliffs or canyons or desert or mountains around them wherever they work. They even want a good view of the sky. Now, they don't mind planting fields of sweet corn or alfalfa, and they like to pick chili and squash and tomatoes. They'll put up strong fences or train young wild horses, but they say they can't stand to be cooped up indoors. So now, of course, my dad is asking, how many people are as lucky as we are? But I've called this meeting, and I say, I bet you can make more money working in a building somewhere in town. Remember our number one rule, he says, we have to see the sky. Well, you could look through a window, I say, but they won't even think about it. Do you see what I mean about being the only sensible one? Finally, my mother says, all right, mountain girl, we're going to explain how we figure our money. You be the bookkeeper tonight. So she hands me a pencil and some yellow paper. No wonder I had to call this meeting about money. Can you believe my father is sitting here looking me straight in the eye and saying, but mountain girl, I thought you knew how rich we are. I say, we can't get very far in this discussion if you won't even admit that we're poor. I'll prove it to you right now, he says. Let's make a list of the money we earn in a year. Well, how much is that, I ask. I'll write it down. But he says, not so fast. We have a lot of things to think about before we add them up. Well, what kinds of things? Well, my mother says, we don't just pay ourselves in cash. We have a special plan so that we get paid in sunsets too. And having time to hike around the canyons and look for eagle nests. But I say, can't you give me one single number to write down on this paper? So we start with $20,000. That's how much my father says it's worth it to him to work outdoors where he can see the sky and feel the wind and smell the rain an hour before it starts raining. So I've just written $20,000 when my mother says, you better make that $30,000. because it's worth at least another 10 to hear coyotes howling back in the hills. So I'll write 30,000. Then she remembers that they like to see long distances and faraway mountains that change color about 10 times a day. That's worth another $5,000 to me, she says. So I scratch out what I had written and write $35,000. My father thinks of something else. When a cactus blooms, you should be there to watch it because it might be a color you won't see again any other day of your life. How much would you say that color is worth? 50 cents, my brother says. But they decide on another 5,000. So now I write $40,000. But I forgot that my father likes to make bird sounds. So of course he has to add another 10,000 for having both day and night birds all around us. So I cross out what I had and I write 50,000. Now my mother says, let's see what our mountain girl is worth to us. I'm beginning to catch on to their way of thinking, so I suggest I'm worth about 10,000. Don't underestimate yourself, my father says. So they end up deciding that I'm worth about $1 million. I say I don't think I am, but I'll write it down anyway. In fact, it turns out that every one of us is worth $1 million. So now I have $4,050,000. Then I realize I want to add another 5,000 for the pleasure I have of wandering in the open country all alone, free as a lizard. So that makes it $4,055,000. Finally, my brother says, put down $7 more for all the nights we get to sleep outdoors under the stars. We all say $7 doesn't seem to be enough. So we talk him into making it $5,000. Now my paper says $4,060,000. And we haven't even started counting the cash. To tell the truth, the cash part doesn't seem to matter anymore. I suggest it shouldn't even be on the list of our kind of riches. So the meeting is over. The rest of them go outside to see a sliver of the moon. But I'm still sitting here at our nice homemade kitchen table, and I'm writing this book about us. I kind of pat the table, and I'm glad it's ours. In fact, I think the title of my book is going to be The Table Where Rich People Sit. Now, what does it mean to be rich? In our culture, it means to have lots of money and the things that money can buy. What I like about this story is that it reminds us that our definition of rich is too small. What makes our lives rich? When you think about it, you realize that most of our riches don't come with a price tag. Like a sunrise that lights up the sky in bright orange, or the soothing rhythm of waves massaging the beach, or a full moon on a cloudless night, or an aromatic cup of coffee first thing in the morning, or a child's uninhibited laughter, an unexpected phone call from an old friend, a book that's so interesting you can't put it down, a nap in the middle of the afternoon, singing along while listening to your favorite song, receiving a thank you note in the mail, the pitter-patter of gentle rain on the window, the rustling of leaves in the trees by a gentle breeze, making a cat purr by rubbing its back, mastering a skill you thought you'd never learn, breaking an old habit you thought you'd never overcome, saying I love you to that special someone, hearing that special someone say, I love you. A congregation of open-minded, accepting friends. A short sermon. I suspect that all of us would discover that we are much richer than we generally assume if we could practice the discipline, I'm choosing that word carefully, the discipline of gratitude. Now, the discipline of gratitude is not living in denial that life does have its misfortunes, setbacks, heartbreaks, tragedies, and injustices. So this is not an invitation to shut our eyes to anything, but to open them to everything, including the wonders and delights, treasures and pleasures, miracles and blessings all around us if we but have the eyes to see them. Now, I'll be the first to admit that under some circumstances, you may have to strain to see the rays of light through the clouds. But they are there. They are always there. With grateful eyes, we can see that we sit at the table where rich people sit. Amen.
Thank you, Neal. You've made me realize it's a very profound story that I'm rich because I'm alive and because I have you. Now's the time in our service for the candles of community. So if you have a significant personal joy or sorrow or concern that you'd like to have shared from the pulpit, please phone or email Andrea Dudick, our administrator, by noon on Friday. And if you would like to speak for yourself before the service begins, pick up one of the candles out of the basket in the foyer and come forward and briefly tell us what your joy is or your concern. And for those of you who are on streaming, if you'd like to have a candle lit, please text or email Andrea to have it read during the service. Will those of you who've taken a candle please come forward at this time?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Harris, and I light this candle in joy and gratitude. From September to last Thursday, I had a couple of medical issues, separate and apart, that required a variety of medical procedures, doctor's appointments, follow-up visits, and all without the benefit of my car, because my doctor said, "You, madam, drove here today?" "Yes." "You can't drive anymore." So I was banned from driving for all that time. Well, I am lighting this candle in joy and gratitude because so many people stepped forward and said, "I'll take you. I will gladly sit in the waiting room for 2 and 3 and 4 hours for you. I'll take you to your follow-ups. Need to go to Trader Joe's? Let's go to Trader Joe's. Need a ride from the courthouse? I'll take you." 2 people actually said, "Want to go to dinner Saturday night? We'll pick you up. Let's go." So I am so grateful that a time that could have been so very stressful and filled with anxiety was not, because I felt loved and cherished and cosseted and taken care of. So Andrea Dudick, Karen Peters, Monica Miller, Michelle Andra, Kevin Meredith, and Anna Hamilton, thank you so very much. I love you all, and you made my day so much brighter, so here's to you.
I'm Deb Matherly, and this is in gratitude for our veterans, including my father-in-law, who was with the Seabees, the construction battalion in the Philippines in World War II, and my son, who left after 25 years in the Navy to 2 years ago, so I just celebrate all of our wonderful veterans. And I also want to celebrate the value of voting. Lula defeated Bolsonaro in Brazil, which may give us a chance to save the Amazon forest, and there seems to be democracy in our country as well. So, celebration. Thank you.
This is a celebration of joy and a thank you to Kevin McKinney from the Social Action Committee. Kevin sponsored our fundraiser yesterday. We had a lovely time. A lot of people listened to his music streaming. And it was an international release because he heard from his brother in Canada that he also listened.
Okay, and for one last candle, we'll light one final candle for the joys and concerns that remain silent in our hearts. If you'll join me now for just a moment of silent meditation. Thank you. Now is the time to share our abundance. As you may know, this congregation contributes to Share the Plate, where half of our cash collection each Sunday goes to local charities, which is a way for us to give back to the community. And this month's Share the Plate is Harvest Hope. I hope most of you know what that is. We collect in the social hall for Harvest Hope, and a lot of people here volunteer. When we're talking about this, it's the kind of thing, I don't know, how many people have volunteered for Harvest Hope? Look at that. Those of you out there on YouTube can't see that. An enormous number of people here do. And they're a food bank, of course, and they help people every day. We will have someone here near the end of the month to tell you again about Harvest Hope. But I hope most of you know what we're talking about. And if you're contributing by check, please read the Share the Plate on the memo line, or you can make an online contribution. And those of you who are on streaming may certainly contribute too, and you'll find the link on the UUCC website at uucolumbia.org. Ushers, if you'll come forward and we'll take up the collection.
Our offertory music this morning is Autumn Memories by Wilson Smith.
We receive these gifts with gratitude and appreciation, as it demonstrates that we truly are a giving community. And now it's time for our guest.
Well, I'm embarrassed to admit to you that my images of the first Thanksgiving come mainly from childhood school plays and bulletin boards. In that image, I see Native Americans who wore big feathered war bonnets and teepees in the background, and that the Pilgrim women wore white bonnets, and the Pilgrim men wore tall black hats with buckles and shoes with buckles. What is it about Pilgrims and their buckle fetish? I don't know. And I imagine they had a meal of butterball turkey and dressing, and cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie. And they sat down to eat in brotherly love, realizing they were essentially the same despite coming from worlds apart, and that they remained perpetual friends who helped each other out through thick and thin. I have to admit that my images are a mixture of fact and fiction, history and myth, but mostly myth. In point of fact, the Pilgrims didn't celebrate Thanksgiving the next year or any other year thereafter. Now, several U.S. presidents made Thanksgiving a one-time holiday until President Lincoln made it an annual holiday. And you know, we don't even know the exact date of the first Thanksgiving. We know it happened sometime between late September and early November 1621. And who were these Native Americans at that first Thanksgiving? Well, they were the Wampanoags. They were a confederation of tribes in what is now Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And they didn't live in teepees. The Plains Native Americans lived in teepees, but they lived in wigwams, round-roofed houses made of poles that were covered with birch or elm bark. And they wore deer skins to keep warm. And the men and women braided their hair with a single feather, not with one of those big feathery war bonnets. And they lived by fishing and farming and hunting. And they lived in villages governed by tribal councils. Get this, where both men and women participated in passing and enforcing laws. I'll remind you that it was not until 1920 that women in the U.S. received the right to vote. 150 years after that first Thanksgiving, Benjamin Franklin invited a Wampanoag delegation to Albany, New York, to teach them about their democratic system of government. And that served as a model for our Articles of Confederation and then the Constitution. Now, what about their spirituality? Well, they had a spirituality of kinship with nature. They called the turtle and deer and the fish their brothers and sisters. And whenever a hunter made a kill, he was careful to leave behind some bones and meat to help other animals to survive. And their spirituality involved a kinship with others. Hospitality and charity were extended toward strangers. Visitors were provided with whatever share of food the family happened to have, even if their supply was low. And the same courtesy was extended to the Pilgrims, who would not have survived without their help. Now, the real hero of that first Thanksgiving is Squanto. In 1605, 15 years before the Pilgrims arrived, Squanto went to England with a friendly English explorer by the name of John Weymouth. And there he learned to speak English and served as a guide and interpreter for English sea captains, and returned to his village of Patuxent in 1620, only to discover that the whole village had been wiped out by diseases brought by English slave traders. So, Squanto joined a neighboring village in the Wampanoag Federation. A year later, he was surprised to discover English people in his old deserted Patuxent village, and they were the Pilgrims. And the Pilgrims were very surprised to meet a Native American who spoke English. What Squanto discovered was that the Pilgrims were not faring very well. They lived in dirt-covered shelters, and the wheat they had brought with them would not grow in the rocky Massachusetts soil. And half of them had died that first winter. So Squantos decided to stay with them and teach them how to survive. He brought them deer meat and beaver skins and taught them how to hunt. He taught them how to cultivate corn and other new vegetables in this new world. He taught them how to use fish for fertilizer, how to build Native American houses. He pointed out poisonous plants and plants that could be used as medicine. He taught them how to dig and cook clams, how to get sap from maple trees. If it had not been for Squanto and other Native Americans, the Pilgrims would not have survived. Now contrast that Native American hospitality with our government's treatment of refugees across our southern border. Think of the contrast. This current hysteria over refugees from Central and South America, inflamed by fear-mongering politicians, is as ironic as it is despicable. At the very time we're celebrating Thanksgiving, the welcoming of refugees to these shores, some of the descendants of the original refugees oppose our welcoming modern-day refugees. These self-serving politicians are drowning out the facts with their fears in pursuit of power. And of course, we know the lead voice of hysteria comes from our former president, who has characterized them as, quote, murderers, rapists, drug dealers, and other criminals. Trump initiated a zero-tolerance policy, which was meant to deter all refugees from coming here from south of the border. And you may remember that children were taken from the arms of their parents, some as young as a few months old, and put them in literal cages. It looked like a scene from Nazi Germany. I've never been so ashamed of my country. Thousands of children have been separated from their parents. And despite Mr. Trump's claim in that first presidential debate that these facilities were, quote, in his words, so clean, and that these children were, quote, well taken care of, independent investigators have found that the facilities were cold in the winter and hot in the summer, that there were no hot showers, that some children were kept in closed cells, and that there were reports of physical and sexual abuse. It turns out that the rapists were on this side of the border. And to this day, Homeland Security cannot track down the parents of over 500 children. You don't have to be a psychologist to know that being separated as a young child from your parent is traumatic and results in a lifetime of PTSD. President Biden said it best. It's criminal. It's downright criminal. Here are the facts, which sadly to say no longer have much bearing on much of the political discourse in our country. These families who are coming here are refugees from gang violence and war and lack of jobs and natural disasters and authoritarian governments. They've left everything behind. Their families, their friends, their neighbors, their churches, their communities, their country, for the chance to give their children a chance for a better life. That's what this is about. They're like the Irish who fled the famine. They're like the Jews who fled the Nazis. They're like the Cubans who fled Castro. They're like the Vietnamese boat people who fled the communists. They're like the Pilgrims who fled England. As we celebrate Thanksgiving, we would do well to remember our history and to give thanks for those who extended hospitality to our desperate refugee ancestors, and to aspire to be more like our benefactors than our kith and kin. Well, by that fall, the Pilgrims were faring much better, thanks mainly to Squanto. The corn they had planted had done well, and there would be enough food to last them through the winter. They were living comfortably in their wigwams. They were in better health. They knew more about how to survive in this new land. And so they decided to have a Thanksgiving feast to celebrate their good fortune. Captain Miles Standish, leader of the Pilgrims, invited Squanto and Samoset, another English-speaking Native American, and Massasoit, the leader of the Wampanoags, and their immediate families to join them for the feast. But they had no idea how large Native American families could be. So over 90 of them showed up. So the Pilgrims did not have enough food. So the Native Americans supplied most of the feast. What did they have at that first Thanksgiving? Venison and wild turkey, cod and bass, beans, squash, corn soup, cornbread, nuts and berries. They did not have ham because neither the Pilgrims nor Native Americans had pigs at that time. They did not have potatoes or yams because they had not yet been introduced to New England. They didn't have corn on the cob because Native American corn was good only for cornmeal. They didn't have cranberry sauce. Cranberries were available, but not sugar. They didn't have pumpkin pie. Now, they may have had pumpkin pudding, but there was nothing there for crust, for pie. And get this. During the meal, the Native American women sat and ate with the men, as was their custom, while the Pilgrim women stood behind their men, behind the table, and waited for the men to finish, as was their custom. For 3 days, the Native Americans and Pilgrims feasted together. Now, who were these Pilgrims? Well, the Pilgrims were a splinter group from the Puritans, and you've heard of the Puritans. They got their name from the fact that they wanted to purify the Church of England. You remember King Henry VIII withdrew from the Vatican because he wanted to get a divorce. They wouldn't let him. So he separated his church and formed the Church of England, separate from Catholicism. Well, the Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England from all vestiges of Catholicism, make it a Protestant church. Well, the Pilgrims were a subset of Puritans. They gave up on purifying the Church of England. They wanted to separate themselves not only from the Church of England, but from sinful society and live their fundamentalist faith. So in 1608, a group of them immigrated from England to Holland to escape persecution. And though in Holland they enjoyed religious freedom, there they were discouraged by economic hardship and the Dutch influence over their children. And so they decided to immigrate to America. And so they set sail to Plymouth, England, where they picked up more Pilgrims. And on September the 16th, 1620, 102 Pilgrims set sail from Plymouth to North America. It took them 65 days to reach Cape Cod. And once they arrived, they decided to settle that abandoned Native American village of Patuxent and they called it Plymouth. Now, these pilgrims were not just innocent refugees from religious persecution. They themselves could be quite intolerant. They were, after all, Puritans who strove to purify themselves and everyone else of everything that did not conform to their strict interpretation of the Bible. They saw themselves as God's elect. You were either for them or against them. They believed in the imminent occurrence of Armageddon in Europe, and they saw it as their mission and duty to establish the kingdom of God in this new world. It was their promised land. They believed promised by God. But there's one thing that stood in the way of their divinely ordained promised land. Those people, the Native Americans, whom they saw as savages, heathens, worshipers of Satan. These are their words. When Native Americans were decimated by diseases that the Puritans brought from Europe, the Puritans gave thanks to God. Here are the words of Reverend Cotton Mather, quote, "We give praise to God for destroying chiefly young men and children, the very seeds of increase, thus clearing the forest to make way for better growth." Here are the words of John Winthrop, first governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, quote, "In all, about 4,000 souls and upward are in remarkably good health. For the natives, they are nearly all dead from the smallpox, so as the Lord has cleared our title to what we possess." And the Native Americans who were not killed by European-born viruses and bacteria were killed by the Europeans themselves because they were living on land that the Puritans believed God had intended for them alone. And they took as their model the biblical narrative of God commanding the Israelites to exterminate, this is biblical language now, to exterminate men, women, children, and livestock and the people occupying their promised land. People who claim the Bible as their moral guide either haven't read the Bible or don't have much of a sense of morality. A generation after that first Thanksgiving, after several more ships of Puritans had arrived and shifted the demographic balance of power, the Puritans launched a genocide against the Native Americans. Now, in wartime, Native Americans observed their wartime code of ethics, which meant they attacked only fellow warriors and they stopped fighting when the offense against the tribe had been rectified. But the English, like the Spanish conquistadors, fought an all-out total war. They killed non-combatants, women, children, the elderly. They burned Indian villages and fields and poisoned their rivers and streams. Here's a description by William Bradford of the Puritans burning a Pequot village in a surprise attack in the middle of the night. He records this: "Indeed, such a dreadful terror did the Almighty let fall upon their spirits, that they would fly from us and run into the very flames, where many of them perished. And God was above them, who laughed at his enemies and the enemies of his people to scorn, making of them a fiery furnace. Thus were the stout-hearted spoiled, having slept their last sleep. Thus did the Lord judge among the heathen, filling the place with dead bodies." A delightful Reverend Cotton Mather of the Second Church of Boston called the slaughter a barbecue. and said it was, quote, the just judgment of God. 50 years after that first Thanksgiving, in just 50 years, nearly all Native Americans of all tribes in New England were either annihilated or enslaved. So, what lessons can we learn from that first Thanksgiving? Well, one is the meaning of the word history. A long time ago when I was at Wake Forest, I had a history professor who said the word history is really the combination of two words: his story. The people who write the history books, who tell the story, are the people who won the wars and have the power. Now, as a therapist who often works with couples, I've learned the hard way that it's not a simple matter to arrive at the objective truth of a story. There's usually his truth, her truth, and my truth, and rarely do all three coincide. A story is unique from the perspective from which it is seen and told. American history has been his story, with his being the white, male, European, Christian perspective. Now that leaves out a lot of perspectives of a lot of other people who are American, and just as American as white Europeans, including the original Americans. It's easy to stereotype those with stories who have not been honored, even to see them as less than human. I hope that in my telling of the Thanksgiving story that I've tried to honor the Native American perspective. What can we learn? That the Puritans are alive and well. The Puritan instinct runs deep in our American history and psyche. The Puritan instinct is that desire and illusion that we can purify ourselves and our nation by rooting out evil out there. That Puritan instinct is what was responsible for the genocide of Native Americans. It was responsible for the Salem witch trials. It was responsible for the enslavement and segregation of African Americans. It was responsible for the McCarthyism of the 50s. It's responsible today for white Christian nationalism. Today, it is the attempt to root out immigrants, Muslims, LGBTQ people, atheists, socialists, any people who are regarded as the other, not one of us, not truly American, not even really human. To see evil out there always leads to a crusade, but not a righteous crusade, a self-righteous crusade. To resist the Puritan instinct, we must see good and evil as being in here. Any attempt at moral purification must begin with self-examination and self-acceptance and self-improvement. What can we learn? Well, that it matters what we believe. Much of the Puritan violence was motivated and justified by their religion, in the same way that Muslim fundamentalists use their religion to justify their terrorist attacks and suicide bombings. Much the same way that Christian fundamentalists use their religion to justify the bombing of abortion clinics and the murdering of abortion doctors. Some religious beliefs lend themselves to violence. This whole idea of God's elect implies your superiority and others' inferiority. That's why I don't like the song God Bless America, but I do like the song He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. That biblical God can be a brutal God who burns entire cities like Sodom and Gomorrah, or drown the entire human race except for Noah and his family. He can be a judgmental God who condemns the unsaved to an eternal fiery furnace. How's that for a God of love? He can be a sadistic God who condemns his own son to an agonizing death so he can love you? Such beliefs about God tell us more about the believer than God. The Bible has it backwards. We create God in our image. The wrathful gods of Osama bin Laden and Jerry Falwell, they reveal more about the character of bin Laden and Falwell than their gods. In the same way that the religion of kindness and compassion of the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu tell us more about them than their gods. We UUs should not downplay belief as we typically do, because belief leads to action, and action leads to habit, and habit leads to character, and character leads to destiny. It does matter what we believe. And the salvation of our world depends on our believing in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It depends on our belief in justice, equity, and compassion in our relationships and in our society. It believes in our belief in the interdependent web of our existence. What can we learn? I think we can learn a lot from the spirituality of the Native Americans. From Western Christianity, we've inherited this division between the saved and the unsaved, the believer and the infidel. We need to claim our Native American heritage of hospitality and charity toward the person in need, which, by the way, I don't think is too far from the teachings of Jesus, whoever that person may be. From our Judeo-Christian legacy, we have inherited the attitude and practice of dominion, and that's the word the Bible uses, dominion over nature, which tries to subdue, conquer, and exploit our natural environment like there's no tomorrow. During this time of climate change, in which the average temperature this year surpasses last year, in which the polar ice caps are melting and the sea levels are rising, in which hurricanes on the East Coast and fires on the West Coast become more frequent and more intense, in which more and more species become extinct because their natural environs change almost overnight. More than ever, we need to claim our Native American heritage of our kinship with nature, which recognizes, as Chief Seattle put it so long ago, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. So I must confess to you that my childhood version of the first Thanksgiving was rather naive and simplistic. But to quote St. Paul, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put away my childish ways. As an adult, I want to learn and live the truth from as many perspectives as possible, which is one of the main reasons I became a Unitarian. I want to know the whole story, not just his story. I know. The straightforward, unvarnished truth may make us uncomfortable, but it can also set us free. Amen.
I invite you to join in singing our closing hymn in your teal hymnal, number 1010, We Give Thanks. Please stand as you're willing and able. I'll sing it once through and invite you to join me then in singing it twice. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
Our closing words are written by Reverend Scott Taylor. Memory invites us to maintain our grip on the past, but also calls us to pay attention to who we are in the present. Memory's question is not just, do you remember? But how do you want to be remembered? Amen.
I invite you to join in singing our congregational benediction. May the blessings
Thank you for joining us today. The great crowd. I'm so glad to see you. And thank you, too, those on YouTube for joining us. And please join us in the social hall after the service or outside for visiting, either one. And for the last words, I'm going to claim the leader's prerogative and give you some Irish words that I absolutely love. May the road rise up to meet you. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thank you.